Hello, Garland Nixon here. Is it possible that at some point we could see a peace deal in Ukraine? Depends. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here. Let's talk about the possibility of a peace deal in Ukraine and what it would look like. Let's start here. In order to have a peace deal, you must have two parties who are willing to come to an agreement, who desire an agreement. You must have a certain level of trust between these two parties so that they both believe that after the agreement is made, both will maintain the agreement. Or you must have some type of either third party or some built-in guarantee in the deal that keeps the agreement going if there isn't any trust. So let's talk about that, about the problems, about how it would happen between who. Let's start here. Who are the belligerents here? This is an easy one. This is an easy one. This is between the United States and Russia. How is it between the United States and Russia? Now, if you don't agree with this, I've done video after video. You're going to have to watch a lot of my videos and some of my other videos to understand, but this is my position, and I'm not going to take an hour to explain it. This is about the Wolfowitz doctrine. The United States empire is losing its singular leadership, power, and authority over the world. I would say has lost it. And in an attempt to maintain something that it has already lost, which is unipolar hegemony, which is control over the world economically, physically, politically, culturally, you name it, total control. The United States is attempting to stop any rising powers. In this case, the main two being Russia and China. Certainly in the Middle East, the big regional power is Iran. And of course, in Latin America, the big regional power would be Venezuela. They see Brazil as a regional power, but because Venezuela has so much oil, they see the potential there for Venezuela to be the next Saudi Arabia economically, and they see that as the big economic threat. So you will notice that the countries that I named that have the potential for economic power, military power, cultural power, particularly economic and military, because most of the countries that I've talked about, I don't see that they're trying to export their cultures anyway. But these countries are the ones that are targeted by the United States. So in the instance of Ukraine, in the same way that the United States has ventured up to China's border in the physical manner of creating enmity between Taiwan and China. One time is about pumping weapons into Taiwan. They're doing the same thing, Ukraine on Russia's border. So for anyone to treat Russia and Ukraine, that dynamic, as though it's some independent dynamic and it just happened between those two countries and it's not part of the grand chessboard strategy, would be naive. The United States has written about this strategy, literally written documents saying we can take Ukraine, we can arm Ukraine, and we can use that to destabilize Russia. They've literally written documents to say that. So to argue that that's not the plan now would be not even naive. It would be preposterous. So in order for the United States to want a peace deal, there'd have to be a couple of incentives. One being they've changed their mind about unipolarity. Well, that ain't the case. The other would be that they see that they're going to take a L and there's no way around it. Well, right now, I think that is the case. I think it's obvious. Look, there are some entities within the U.S. government who, though they tell us no, the Ukrainians are going to win any day, that know the truth. Now, you don't get me wrong. The Biden people, the secretary, the State Department, etc., they're not there. They live in this dream world that they create. They're psychopaths and they create some vision of the world, and they live in that vision of the world. So you wouldn't want to look to them for a reality check by any stretch of the imagination. They are still thinking to themselves, how can we destabilize Russia? But they are coming to grasp the reality that things ain't looking so good for Ukraine, and their time is getting short when they'll have a window to do anything other than simply take a major L. So I think they're looking for a way out. The problem is this. Let's start here about a peace deal. So this is the first thing we need to talk about. A peace deal between the United States and Russia. I don't see that possible. Let me tell you why. Number one, there's always already some murmurings by some of the neocons of all psychotic people. Victoria Nuland and Blinken in the State Department people are talking about what would a peace deal with Russia look like. But it always looks like this. And all you need to do is look at the Iranian nuclear deal. How'd that work out? How'd that work out? It's impossible. It didn't work out. Why is that? Because of the mentality and the thought process of these neocons. Every deal with them, because they have no empathy, they have no understanding that there are parties on the other side. They're simply, we are in control of everything and everyone must do what we say. They feel entitled, completely, absolutely entitled, narcissistic. So their deal looks like, you ever have a friend, and people know about this in America, you might know about it in England when it comes to soccer trades. I don't know if they do soccer trades. I don't know, football. But in the United States, there's the big fan who loves his team and they want a better player on their team. And you say, well, what do you think? And they're like, well, I think we ought to make a trade. And you're like, well, what would that trade look like? Well, clearly they want the best player they can get. But for some reason in their mind, they think they can give up nothing and get the best player. And they're like, okay, here's the plan. And you're like, yeah. We have the bumper off a 1967 Pontiac Ventura. Yeah, we're going to trade that to this other team. In return, they're going to give us Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Wilt Chamberlain. They're going to throw in Pele. They're going to throw in Tom Brady and Wayne Gretzky. And you're like, don't you think your side of the trade's a little weak? And they're like, okay, we'll throw in the wheels too. That's the way the neons think. I mean, the neocons think. And we all know, people in America all know, you got those friends, right? You've got those friends that you ask them about a trade for whatever team they like. And the trade always involves them giving up some player that barely even belongs in the league, that'll probably get cut, that'll be selling refrigerators in 2 weeks because he's going to get thrown out of the league. And they're going to trade them to another team. And in return, they're going to get an all-star. They're going to get like the most valuable player of the league for nothing, right? And they can never seem to think perhaps the people on the other team may want equal value in trade, right? All right, we've all got those friends. Granted, doesn't mean they're sociopaths or narcissists. It may just be out of zealousness and love for their own team, and they're hoping that they can trade nothing and get everything, but those trades just never happen. Usually the other way around. You give up your best players, and somebody takes you to the cleaners for the old Pontiac Ventura bumper. Okay, that's the way the neocons think. The neocons are like, all right, we got a plan. Have you heard Blinken and these people lately? They got a plan for Ukraine. Here's the way it works. Russia gives up all the land that they've taken in this war. Now, Russia's winning. They're dominating. They're taking city after city, and they're on path for victory. However, they don't, right now, all they're asking Russia to do is to take an L, to pretty much unconditionally surrender, give up all the land they've taken, disarm Crimea completely. Nothing military, demilitarized. Crimea will be nothing but roses and flowers. There will not even be a slingshot in Crimea. Meanwhile, the United States will arm Ukraine to the teeth. Any and every piece of military hardware they could ever dream of 10 times over. So that's the plan. Think about the plan that they're offering Russia. This is literally the plan. You guys give back everything that you've taken militarily, and then some, and Crimea. So basically give up part of Russia for starters. Demilitarize Crimea, a military base that you've had since the 1780s under Catherine the Great. You're going to give that up, certainly. And Ukraine won't be a part of NATO, but NATO will be a part of Ukraine. You see, that's the plan. That's what we had in the beginning. It wasn't that Ukraine was a part of NATO. It was NATO was a part of Ukraine. No, we're not going to bring NATO into Ukraine, because that would have NATO into Ukraine. Certainly, who would do that? But we're going to take all the NATO hardware, all the NATO training, all the NATO everything, and we're going to put that in Ukraine. What the hell's the difference if Ukraine's in NATO or NATO's in Ukraine? It comes down to the same thing. Russia wasn't upset over the wording of it. They weren't upset over the how you said it. Well, what happens if Ukraine joins NATO? Well, we're going to load Ukraine up with hardware, and it's all going to military hardware, and it's all going to point to you. Oh, I don't like that. Well, what happens if NATO comes to Ukraine? Oh, we're going to load Ukraine up with military hardware, and it's all be pointed to you. Oh, well, that sounds fair. I don't think so. So, of course, that tells you one of two things. Either the neocons are getting heat from the military and other people who are starting to say, look, guys, this ain't working out well. And, we got a war with China. We're trying to destroy China here because they're in the passing lane. So look, how can we get out of this? And neocons, of course, would say, yeah, we'll come up with a proposal. And they come up with an absurd proposal, knowing that their enemies, their adversaries are going to turn it down. And then they can go back to the Pentagon and whoever and say, hey, guys, I made an honest try. I can't understand why they wouldn't take that proposal. Or that's option one. But never underestimate how nuts and crazy and insane these people are. They could have legitimately sat around and said, all right, let's sit around and come up with a proposal that maybe Russia will accept. Okay, they'll give us everything. We'll give them nothing. And we'll go back to arming Ukraine like we were when they started this war. And they will back off everything. They'll give us everything. We'll give them nothing. And we'll continue doing what we were doing before the war started. Yeah, that's a great plan. I think they'll buy it. It is. Do not discount the possibility that these people are so insane that they literally came up with that plan. And they're going to like, all right, Russia, we've decided to negotiate. Here's the plan. And Russia's already like, yeah, okay, look, see you guys later. We got business to take care of on the ground here. So I say all that to say this. There ain't no universe in which the neocons, the Blinkens and the Sullivans and the Bidens and the Newlands can strike a deal for peace with anybody, If the aliens landed tomorrow and said, look, Biden, Newland, Sullivan, gather around. Here's what I need you to do. We're the aliens. We got all the power. You have 1 week. If you don't go in this thing in 1 week, we're going to kill every one of you. I mean, what if the aliens just landed and said, we're just going to vaporize every single one of you? If you got 7 days, and this whole thing, this planet is a giant ant farm. We put this thing together so we could kind of watch how you guys developed. Maybe not going as well as we'd have liked, but what's important now is you idiots are on the verge of wiping each other out, and we're not going to let that happen. So this is also part of the experiment. We're going to come to you, and we're going to say to you, you got 7 days. 7 days to end this thing. Within 7 days, we will come back in 7 days. And at that point, and we're going to be watching the whole time, we want to hear one thing from you. We have negotiated a deal with the Russians, which includes us backing off, closing the bases around Russia, giving them the benefit of the doubt, giving them a guarantee that we will not attack them, taking all of our military hardware out of the area, shaking hands, and moving on. We are abandoning our plot to surround and choke out Russia. You got 7 days. If you don't do it within those 7 days, we're vaporizing every stinking one of you. That's Newland, that's Lloyd Austin. Bring all of them in there. Sit them all around and say, bring them on the alien ship. If you don't do it, your choice. They'd all get vaporized. 7 days later, they'd be sitting there with an excuse. The aliens would bring them back on the ship and say, let me see what you got. Well, we've got an offer for you, aliens. They're going to say, yeah, we got an offer for you. You see that little portal? Yeah, you're going to step in it. When you step in that, it takes you right out into this into space, and you'll be frozen and killed instantly. That's the portal for you. Now, we gave you our option. Tell us what you got. Yeah, okay, we've got some documents here that demonstrates to you why we have to. That's what would it be? They're all gone. Every one of them, bodies floating around in space, and the aliens would be like, all right, who's next on line? And they bring in, the Speaker McCarthy and whoever and say, well, guys, it looks like they're all gone. We're giving you the same option. You got 7 days. If you can't do it within 7 days, and then they continue on, you know what? They get frozen too. They don't have the capacity to do this. They don't have the ability to do this. They don't have the concept of reality to do this. They can't do it. The universe that they live in doesn't allow that to happen, and they will die before they'll let it happen. Now they got some people around them. Now, what the aliens could do is go get Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and the billionaires and Warren Buffett and say to them, now either Joe Biden and these people do it, or you're dying in 7 days. That's the only way it could get done. But even then, I don't think it could, because they'd be like, Joe Biden, do it. They'd be like, huh, what? Do what? Make a deal. And they'd still go to Russia with some half-assed cockamamie deal, and Russia would reject it. And they go back and they tweak it a little bit. All right. Fair enough. You don't have to demilitarize Crimea per se. We'll allow you to have a slingshot in Crimea. And they go back and forth over the size of the slingshot. And Russia would be like, get out of here. And it'd be down to the last day, and they would get vaporized because they can't do it. Now, what's going to happen? So can we get a peace deal? Now that we've eliminated any possibility of the neocons getting a peace deal, let's move on. Who could get a peace deal and why? The Europeans. It should be fairly obvious right now that the relationship between the U.S. empire and its vassals is tenuous, shall we say, right? This thing's only been going on for a year, right? And what has happened in that year is something that is interesting, that takes decades to do. And that is that the United States has abandoned any pretense of independence and sovereignty of its vassals, right? No longer does the U.S. pretend that Germany or France or any of these countries are independent states. It simply tells them what to do, humiliates their leaders, and then that's that. They don't care anymore. It's like, hey, there's other great powers threatening to rise. You're ours. We played the game with you long enough, with you elite ruling class in France and Germany. We played long enough to pretend like you guys were in charge. But right now, nah, we ain't doing that. So just shut up and do what you're told. And they're shutting up and doing what they're told. You can only do that, but so far. See, because one of the things that had to be maintained in this country was an illusion of democracy, because the people could be problematic. So it was to keep the people at bay. They maintained an illusion of democracy in these countries and some illusion of independence and sovereignty, and the things that they did and they told them to do, they kept it quiet. Now it's right out in the open. So now that it's right out in the open, the people don't have the illusion of democracy. Only the really, really stupid ones still do, or the propagandized one. But a lot of them are waking up saying, this ain't no democracy. We're just doing what we're told. Our leaders are doing what we're told, and they're acting against our interests. So basically, let me put it to you like this. Here's what I'll say before I go further. Now that they're losing Africa, now that Africa is going to Russia and China, they need a new Africa. That's Europe. That's you. You're the new Africa. What do I mean when I say the new Africa? A couple of things. Number one, what did they do in Africa? They went to a country. They would get, a tiny group of compradors, of traders, and they would pay them off, and they would use it to extract the resources. They would use it to extract things from the economy of that country, and only a tiny, tiny group of people would benefit, that small comprador class, and the rest of the people, their lives are screwed. Well, they don't have any Africa anymore. Well, they got it, but they're struggling to hold on to it, and they could lose it. Same with Latin America. They've got it, but they're struggling to hold on it. They need a new Africa. They need a new Latin America. Guess what? Bad news, Europe. You're the new Africa. You're the new Latin America. So now what do? They got their comprador class, right? They got their traders. They tell them what to do. But at least in Africa, they tried to hide it somewhat. They did a combination of things. They either hid it, or they used sheer brutal repression to oppress the people, so that even if the people knew it, they couldn't do anything about it. The same thing they're going to do in Europe. Same thing they're doing in Europe. Pure, brutal repression. We ain't going to hide it. And if you guys don't like it, we'll use brutal repression to ensure that there's nothing you can do about it. So Europe is the new Africa. Bad news for Europe. Let's see what happens. But from the perspective of how this affects a potential peace deal, something else comes out of this. And that is a a recognition that Europe is viewed by the American, the neocons, as something different, as something subordinate, as something expendable for the neocons, for the US empire. It's subordinate and it is expendable, right? And in that case, it also reveals something that is very, very important in the context of peace in Ukraine, and that is that the security needs of the security proposed security needs, that the arguments for security needs of the U.S. empire. The U.S. empire says we need security, and the way we need security in Eurasia, and the security we need is to ensure that there are no rising powers that could threaten our total dominance. Right? That's the security that the United States is arguing that they need. They need to ensure that there's no rising powers that can threaten their total dominance, economic, culture, every way, right? And Russia has security needs in that they want their border secure and they don't want to be dominated by the US or anyone else. So their security needs requires a multipolar world, which we already have. So Russia is not defending the multipolar world because the multipolar world is already here. Russia is managing the collapse of the US empire. They're managing the US empire's war with modernity, the US empire's war with reality. You see, reality, modernity says powers rise, great world powers rise, great world powers fall. That's modernity. That's reality. That's going to happen. And that the United States fight against that reality, fight against that organic nature of the planet. It has manifested itself in Ukraine in that they're saying the US said we can surround Russia and squeeze Russia. And Russia said, we're going to draw a red line, and that's Ukraine. And the US's position was, if in fact this is a unipolar world, then nobody can draw red lines but us. And let me give you an example of that. It's important. The Solomon Islands is like 7,341 miles or 91 miles. You get the picture, from the US coast. China said we're going to write a deal with a security deal with the Solomon Islands so that we can land our ships there. Excuse me for yawning. We can resupply, things like that. The US said we may have to draw a red line. And that red line is if you want to have a military base there. Now think about this. Russia can't draw a red line on its border. China can't draw a red line on Taiwan, which even the United States recognizes as part of China. So this is part of China, recognized by the UN, recognized by the United States as part of China. China can't draw a red line around Taiwan. The United States can draw a red line around Solomon Islands, 7,341 miles away. What that means is the US is saying we own the planet. No one can draw red lines but us. The red line that we draw is around the earth. We draw a red line around the globe, and nobody can do anything that we don't tell them to do. So what Russia said was, well, we don't buy that, so we're drawing a red line in Ukraine. And now this war is about that, whether or not Russia can draw a red line in Ukraine. Reality, they said we can. The US said you can't. But Russia said, well, there's only one way to settle this. Either back off, either make a deal with us, or we're going to do our best to militarily kick you out of Ukraine. We're not going to have Ukraine in NATO, and we ain't going to have NATO in Ukraine. So the fight is whether or not other countries can draw a red line. So that's the war going on there, what it's really about. So Russia is arguing we can draw a red line. So they know they're fighting a war in a grand sense, but they also know they don't want NATO on their, the U.S. military on their border. So they're fighting it, an existential fight, for their own security on their border. The argument for the Quislings in Europe was, look, Russia is a threat to you. Therefore, you have to help us surround and menace Russia. Well, that was always a lie. It was always a lie. But the truth is, the Europeans have security needs. The Russians have security needs. They have real physical security needs. They have a border between each other, and they have an outside interferer, which is the United States, who's trying to stir up problems and cause trouble and war. At some point, and I believe this, the time will come, Russia already knows this, when some European leaders are forced to come to grips with the reality that their security needs aligns perfectly with Russia. And one of the big reasons is because their economic needs aligns with Russia. They got industry, which is rapidly moving to the United States and Asia. If the United States is trying to deindustrialize them, and Russia has the things that they need to fire their industries, right? And the United States, what they also, I believe, will eventually wake up to realize, if they're not already waking up to realize this, slowly but surely, they can't admit it, is that the United States right now sees three threats to them, three big rising power of threats: China, Russia, and the EU. And the United States aims to destroy all of them. And the only one they're having success with right now is the EU. They're destroying the EU intentionally. They're destroying Germany. Look, the US wants to destroy German economy because they believe if German economy aligns with Russia's economy, it'll be so powerful that'll be a threat to them. This is all about the US saying, are there threats to us? Are there rising powers? Germany/Russia could be a co-rising power, and the US ain't having that. And they've written this also time and again. We got to stop Russia and China from coming together. We got to keep them down. Everybody knows this. Excuse me, a lot of people know this. So at some point, can there be a peace deal? In order for that to happen, Europe has to acknowledge that they are two things, even if it's a tacit admission, that they are a target of US imperialism in the same way that China and Russia are targets of US imperialism. And that their security needs aligns with Russia, and that though they argue that they need border security so that Russia doesn't attack them, they don't really need it because Russia has no intention of attacking them. Russia's moves are purely defensive. So the US has to maintain a facade that Russia may attack, or Russia has an inclination to attack the EU. So the US then comes in and says, we're only there to protect the EU because Russia is inclined to attack you. Well, the EU already knows they're not. So the EU's wising up. The question is the comprador class, the Quisling class, the Vichy government, whatever it is, for the governments, for the Europeans, are, for the most part, are going to push back against that because the comprador class benefits. They fill their pockets and they remain the ruling elite. And they're afraid that if the people get wise, the people will change out the leadership. They'll get a new ruling class, and maybe possibly the new ruling class may, for their own survival, if nothing else, say, look, let's kind of recognize what's going on here and let's do a real security deal. And the security deal has to secure us from the United States, and has to secure Russia. Basically, a European security deal would have to look like this. We have to convince the Russians that we're not trying to take them out. That's all it means. Russians ain't trying to take them out. And we have to convince the Russians that we're no longer puppets for the United States. We have to convince the world of that, because as long as the comprador class rules the EU, they're nothing but puppets for the United States. They're expendable, highly expendable. And you can see now their economies are being thrown in the trash. So could there be a peace deal? In theory, there could. And if there is, it requires Europe waking up. That's where the peace deal comes from. And right now we're seeing a very, Europe has to be looking at the US, right? And have you ever been around somebody and you knew them and you thought you knew them? And then you see him start doing things. Like I used to have a friend years ago, like when I was in my 20s, we used to go, you go to bars. There was a place called Fells Point. You go hang out at the bars, right? And I'd hang out with this guy, and he was a cool guy. And we worked out. He was one of our crew of people, and we worked out together, and we drank beers together, and, had pool parties, all kinds of fun stuff, right? But when I started hanging out with this guy, I realized something. As soon as he gets a couple beers in him, he's like, confrontational to people, like he's trying to pick a fight. And I quickly realized this guy's unstable. He's causing problems. I'm not going to hang around him. I got to cut him loose. And I did, because I'm at the part. I'm not trying to hang, I'm 22 years old, 23 years old. I'm not trying to get in fights. So at any rate, sometimes you've been around a person, a friend, whoever, and you look at them and you see them do things and you're like, whoa, that ain't cool. So right now, I think the EU is getting that, some of it. I think if not the comprador class, at least the people, but even some members of the comprador class, they're looking at the US and China. Like the Germans are like, man, we sell a lot of Mercedes-Benz and Beamers. The German industrialists are like, look, you're killing our industry. And we got some, China's a huge market here, and we need to sell, I think 38%, somewhere around 38 to 40% of Mercedes and Beamers are sold in China. Does any company want to lose 38 to 40% of their market? No. So they're like, chill out. And they see the United States is acting crazy. Now, look what happened here just within the last few days. There's bombs and attacks going on in Iran. Well, guess what? That's where Europe gets a lot of their energy, in the Middle East, and you're going to destabilize the Middle East. So I think Europe's looking at these neocons saying, you people are kind of crazy. You're unstable. I think they're demonstrating who they are to the Europeans. And I think that you will see, because this is, people think about, oh my gosh, this has happened. How soon will it happen? Keep in mind something. When we talk about the crumbling empire, a lot of times this took 100 years, this took 50 years here, 10 years here. This leader was in for X amount of time in this empire. What's happening now, and went over it in my last video, the information age, the technology age, people can learn things so much faster. People can develop technology and weapons so much faster. What's happening now in this empire, the crumbling, it's almost in the context of history, of centuries, based on what happens in the last year, 1 year, single year, that little teeny slice of time, it's almost instantly. It's almost instant in the context of time. What has happened to the U.S. Empire? What has happened to the dignity and respect, what little it had around the world, for what little respect it had around the world, the way the world tolerated the coercive foreign policy of the United States, and because they had no choice, because the U.S. the dollar, the U.S. had economic power. That's turning. And now people are all looking east. Everybody's looking east. Saudi Arabia is looking east. Everybody's looking east. And people are looking at the United States. They're looking at Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. They're looking at the the EU, and they're looking at Ursula von der Leyen and Annalena Baerbock, which I hate. My Twitter account always changes that to Angeline. Autocorrect always changes to Angeline, and I forget to change it. They're looking at Bojos and Liz Trusses, and they're realizing, man, these people are run by incompetent clowns. These people are they've become kakistocracies. The West is a kakistocracy now. The West is these countries, the U.S. empire ensures that the leaders of its governments are the most preposterous, farcical, incompetent, corrupt leaders that the society can produce. That's what we have. Joe Biden, the whole Hunter Biden thing. Look at the MI6 and the CIA, and look at the FBI, and look at the things they've done over the last several years. They're corrupt to a level that is unimaginable and incompetent beyond conception, right? That's the reflection of the U.S. empire all the way down. And you look at Ukraine, they turned Ukraine into the United States. That's what they turned it into, United States. What do you got? You got Zelensky, who's living in a dream world, walking around saying things that he knows isn't true. They lose a town, Soledar, and a guy walks around for 2 weeks and we haven't lost Soledar. No, we haven't. We still got it. We're still fighting for it, even though they've lost it. His guy Alexei Arestovich, his Baghdad Bob-esque PR figure. This guy's, we will win. The Russians are going to lose. There's no way they can win. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, we're taking them. We're mowing down the Russians. Ha, ha. They shot 55 missiles at us, and we shot 65 of them down. This kind of crap, right? The guy's out the door, and all of a sudden he's like, yeah, we ain't winning this one. It was all lies. We're screwed, right? It just goes to show he was in that government, and he knew that if you're in that government, they've created a fake world. And if you're in that government, you got to live in that fake world. And he was just living in that fake world. What's the difference between that fake world and the fake world that the Biden has created, that people have created? Look at what's the information that's coming out regarding Russiagate the last few years. It was all a scam. Look at Matt Taibbi's work. Look at Aaron Matei's work, Ray McGovern's work. You look into my work, a lot of people, you look into Russiagate, it was false. It was a scam. They just said, yeah, Russia's hacking and Russia's misleading and disinforming. And when you look at it, it wasn't even, it's not, they didn't even make plausible arguments. And they had fake data behind the arguments. They'd say, yes, we've got the Hamilton 68 dashboard, and that maintains all of these Russian information tweets. And we're watching the trends for these tweets. And that tells us what the Russians are amplifying. Matt Taibbi looked into it, and they didn't have any. They didn't have any. They were just like some guy in Nova Scotia or RT, out of like 630 some Twitter accounts that they were supposed to be following to understand the trend of Russian disinformation on Twitter. Like only 36 of them were actually in Russia, and most of those were RT accounts. And it was like Joe Loria, the editor at Consortium News, some guy in Florida, some person that works in a box store. Get out of here. But they didn't care, because all they had to do was say, we have information about Russians doing something or other that they shouldn't be doing that's terrible. They could go to the media. The media would say, look at that. And Hamilton 68 said it could possibly be wrong. And this was one of these think tanks, the Alliance for Securing Democracy. It was a lie. The whole thing was a scam. The whole thing was a fraud. They know it's a scam. They don't care if it's a scam. They're getting paid off scams. They're sending money to Ukraine. Ukraine's buying crypto. FTX, scam, tens of millions, billions of dollars disappearing, scam, scammity, scam. The whole thing's a scam. So in order to reach a peace deal, you're not going to reach a peace deal with the Russians with a scam, because they ain't playing the scam game. The Russians have basically said this: you're operating, what was it? The difference between Plato's reality and Aristotle's reality? If I remember, I used to remember this. You'll forgive me if I don't. And that was, one of them saw reality as, hard things that you could touch. And the other one saw reality as concepts and the things that you believed. If you believe it all, it's reality. People all believe things, and people, so the difference, well, here's what we have. We have the clash of Aristotle and Plato's realities. The one reality, and I used to know all this stuff. I used to study philosophy, but I forgot. But at any rate, you can't remember everything I read. Sometimes reading too much is just as bad as not reading enough, because it all jumbles together. But the bottom line is, you have a reality where the U.S. lies and creates a false concept for the Europeans. And in that false construct, the Europeans are being threatened by the Russians instead of the U.S. The Russians are planning to attack the Europeans, which the U.S. attacked Germany. Right. So they create this false reality that doesn't match with the physical reality. Meanwhile, the Russians say, I understand all your false realities, but when you come to our border, it becomes physical to us. So we're going to use our military to attack it. So you have a false reality versus a physical reality. That's why the Russians keep saying, look, you guys are talking a lot of trash. Keep talking. This is going to be settled on the ground. That bottom line, it's going to be settled on the ground. It's going to be settled in the realm of the physical reality. You guys can yap all you want to. We're going to settle this thing on the realm. And that will, because what they see is this: the physical solution will eventually drive the conceptual solution. A conceptual solution, as you've heard the Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan when he gets in the ring till he gets punched in the face, right? So all of these conceptual solutions sound great until such time as the artillery rounds start landing. At that point, there's no concept that's going to stop artillery. And that's what the Ukrainians are dealing with. They're dealing with that's what the Ukrainians' civil war is. Let's not talk about, I make the error. Let's not talk about the Ukrainians as though the former Ukrainians in the Donbass don't have a right to claim that that was their country until they were involuntarily run out of it, I would argue. So what has to happen for a peace deal is that these two realities must merge. So the US has a stake in maintaining this false conceptual reality where the Russians truly are a threat to Europe, where Europe's far better off if they don't buy cheap energy and cheap natural resources from Russia to fuel their energy, to fuel their industries, where instead they buy highly overpriced um, um, fuel and energy and natural resources from the US, or they don't get it at all. In the US, their industries then move to the US, or some of them move to Asia. And the Europeans are then impoverished, massively impoverished. But from the perspective of the US says, but yeah, but at least you don't have to deal with Russia. You may be poor, your lives may be destroyed, your culture may be falling apart, your country may be going to hell, but at least we protected you from the Russians who aren't even going to attack them. That's all a conceptual reality. There is no truth to it. And here's where I think those two realities could come together. The Europeans are fighting against a conceptual reality and a physical reality. The conceptual reality is the construct that I've talked about, created by the United States. The physical reality is this: they're losing their jobs. They can't afford energy to heat their homes. Their businesses are closing down. They're mired in corruption, right? So they're facing a physical reality. The physical reality is, I'm cold. I don't have enough heat. I'm surrounded by crime. I'm surrounded by poverty. I'm part of the crime and poverty. My children don't have anything to look forward to when they grow up but a criminal, poverty, impoverished society. My whole world is falling apart. I used to live in a city where we had beautiful sidewalk cafes, and I could walk out to the sidewalk cafe and have a glass of wine and some cheese and some grapes and things of that nature, and talk about politics. Now I can't do that. A, I don't have any money. B, the sidewalk cafe is closed down. C, if there is a sidewalk cafe, only the wealthy and elite class can afford it. And D, I'm afraid to walk down the street because there's too much crime. Those are physical realities. So I think this: when the physical reality of Europe rises to a level that it dominates this mythical construct of the US being some Captain America superhero that's there to protect them from Europe, from the evil expansionist Russian Empire. When those two constructs meet in European poverty, that's when the Europeans will have no choice but to address them. Now, the ruling elite class, will they address them? Maybe, maybe not. But the people at some point are going to say, and they're already started, it's already started in a short period of time. If you think about this, the people are going to act. If you think about it, I get people are like, well, it's happening so slow. Actually, it's not. The level of propaganda that have been put forward, that have been visited upon the European people, is unprecedented in the annals of history. Everything they ride around, everything's painted blue and yellow. Their trains, blue and yellow all over the place. And that's representing to them. It's a form of brainwashing. Ukraine, Ukraine, support Ukraine. Everything's blue and yellow. Their TV, everything's Ukraine. They've got some show that comes on here, 90 Day Fiance or Married at First Sight, whatever it is. And one of the girls on there, one of the women, is Ukrainian. And every other 5 minutes she goes, my country was attacked by Russia, and my country was attacked by Russia, and my country was attacked by Russia. It's a form of brainwashing people. And the Americans are feeling the pain, but not like the Europeans. So those are my thoughts. The Russians, their culture is not one to get mired in mythological, philosophical constructs and then substitute those for reality on the ground. One of the reasons is because of their past, their history. They've been through violence. They've been attacked. They've been, genocided. They've had all kinds of terrible things happen. The 1990s, starvation, all kinds of terrible things. So they don't have the luxury of pretending that reality is whatever they choose it to be. So their culture and society has risen in a manner that they do not have that luxury. They're thinking about how do we survive and how do we protect ourselves? How do we eat? How do we make sure nobody comes and kills us and takes our stuff? That's what they got to think. There ain't a lot of room for mythological, philosophical constructs in that reality. The Europeans, the reality is this. Think about the French. They ain't got any gold mines, but they got a hell of a lot of gold. Why? Because they were living off Africa, parasitical relationship with West Africa. And they're just basically stealing their stuff. So the U.S. empire, the colonial powers have been stealing people's stuff in a parasitical manner and living off of it. Well, you know what? If I'm living off of somebody else's stuff, it's funny because you hear the U.S. or whatever talk about people being lazy and living off of other people. Oh, well, you just want to be lazy and live off of the workers of America. You just want to sit around and take free stuff. Really? Like, for instance, going to other countries and taking all of their resources? That's what our society is made of. That's what our society was created on. That's what Western society, from the sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean. Look, go get a book called Empire of Cotton. I think I've got it right around here somewhere. And it talks about how the sugar plantations in the Caribbean gave rise to, hey, let's take this money and get some cotton mills. And hey, we can do slaves and cotton too. And then we'll build. And so you make all this money off sugar and you make all of this money off of cotton. And then, hey, what do you know? We got India over here. They got a lot of spices. We'll take that will impoverish them and use their spices. So you're basically, living off of a lot of other people. I don't care who likes it. I don't care who doesn't like it. As Malcolm X once said, people said, what you're saying is anti-American. He said, look, what I'm saying is the truth. If the truth is anti-American, don't blame me, blame the truth. These things are historically provable. And if, Spain, France, the US, cotton, sugar, spices, the UK, you can say, well, I don't like what you're saying, Garland. Don't blame me. Blame history. It is what it is. And when your society is constructed like that, you have a lot of luxuries. And one of those luxuries is to be able to live off of mythological, philosophical constructs rather than simply live off the. Now, the people that you're taking their stuff from, they don't have that luxury. And so now what we're looking at, I think, is and people talk about what's going on in the culture now, right? The discussion of the conservative traditional societies who have issue with the construct of gender, multiple genders versus the traditional view of there are two physical genders, right? All of this is the same discussion. It's all the same discussion of societies who are grounded in the physical world in a way, and societies who are grounded in the discussion of the physical world. Let me put it another way. The difference between symbols, right? A word is a symbol, a word is a sound. The difference between symbols and what that symbol is referring to. When I say tree, and you probably all heard me have this discussion, when I say tree is just a sound. If I use that's not that thing over there that has bark and leaves and roots. The word tree is what refers me to that. It's a symbol I use. If I write out the word tree, those letters are symbols. Those symbols refer to that thing over there that you're looking at. Those symbols aren't that thing that you're looking at, right? So when the United States talks about European security, you have to ask yourself, European security is just a word. What are you referring to when you use that word? It's just a word. It's just a phrase, 2 words. It's just a phrase. What does that phrase refer to? That phrase refers to U.S. hegemony. the U.S. maintaining control of the world, and U.S. and whoever, including the Europeans, having to suffer in order to maintain U.S. hegemony. That's what U.S. mean when they say European security, or the Russian threat, or the Chinese threat, or the Iranian threat. Those are just phrases. All they mean is those phrases, those sounds, those symbols mean U.S. maintaining U.S. hegemony. Iranian threat, maintaining U.S. hegemony. North Korean threat, maintaining U.S. hegemony. All of these are the threat that they see as a threat to U.S. world domination and power, which is already gone. When Russia says our Russian security, they mean the U.S. coming up to their border physically, putting physical military infrastructure on their border that can physically attack them, nukes on their border, missiles on their border. See what I mean? It's a different discussion, isn't it? So when the U.S. says European security, their reference is to a concept. Their reference is to, realistically, their reference is to something that doesn't even exist. When the Russians say Russian security, their reference is to physical hardware on their border that can be used to attack them. I'm sure you all see where I'm going with this, and where, so all of that gets back to this. The Russians are in a place that says, we don't have to bargain, but we do have to fight, and we're willing to fight. And wherever this goes, it goes, but we don't have a choice. We're willing to fight. The reality that we live in requires us to fight for the security on our border to keep this hardware out of Ukraine and wherever else we may need to fight. The U.S. is playing some verbal game, some philosophical verbal game to dupe the Europeans into committing economic suicide, which seems to be working quite well right now, I might add. And the question is, do the Europeans at some point, are they forced to reconcile the difference between the U.S. talking about their security and the physical suffering that they're getting and the physical threats that they're experiencing from Russia as a point? Because that's physical threats. Russia's saying, if you go but so far, we'll nuke you. Right? That's physical threats. If you take this too far, we'll kill every one of you. So that's a physical threat. And the Russia's there. Look, man, we don't want to go. We don't want to go there. We're not trying to do this. But if you threaten us with so far, we will kill every single one of you. We don't want to do it, but we'll do it. That is the physical world. So when Europe is able to reconcile the mythical construct that the U.S. has, which says our argument for world hegemony can be transferred into something that makes it appear as though you have a security threat when you don't. The reality that their economic infrastructure is being intentionally dismantled by the U.S. empire so that they will be removed as an economic threat. And the fact that the U.S. empire is putting them in a position where they may face World War III on their border and nuclear annihilation, when they're able to reconcile those three things, and the time will come when they are forced to, the Europeans will then be the drivers for a peace deal. That's what I believe. And though people may look at it and say, they're just quislings, they're just get out of here, Garland, the Europeans will never do that. Reality always smashes through, man. Reality always comes through, and those three things exist. One of them is a false reality created by the neocons in the US. The second one is you're physically going to need food and shelter and heat and water and things like that, and you ain't going to be able to afford those. And the third is you're going to, those same neocons, through their fake false construct of security, are creating an environment where you could face literal annihilation. All those three things at some point are going to come together. And when they do, and they will, the Europeans will be the drivers of this thing. The Europeans will wake up and say, that's it, man. We ain't getting nuked, and our people are getting hungry, and they're going to cut our heads off and kill us. Do not, no matter how long or how advanced people appear to get to be. Remember, people are not but so advanced. You get in a fight with someone And it's an existential fight. They will literally bare their teeth. And I always talk about self-defense. People will literally bare their teeth. If someone feels, then they don't even know they're doing it, threatened, somebody's backed into a corner and they feel like this person's going to kill them, you'll see their teeth. They'll bare their teeth. And what they're saying is, I'll bite you to death if I can. I will bite you. I will tear the flesh from your bones with my bare teeth. They don't realize they're saying that, but they really are. When somebody gets to the point where they're baring their teeth in a fight, they see that as a fight to the death, and they're going to bite and scratch and do anything they can to try to save their lives, right? When people get pushed to that point. And what the neocons are doing in Europe is pushing Europe to the point of an existential threat. And I think the Europeans are getting closer and closer. And what the neocons see as a win isn't really a win. See, one of the things they just did, I'm going to stay too much longer, but one of the things that happened was Europe, was Germany, where the neocons felt like they won. They're like, okay, Germany, send some tanks. And Germany said, no, we can't do that. And they said, well, we need you to send tanks. And Germany said, all right, we'll send them if you send your tanks. And the US said, okay, we're sending tanks. Germany said, okay, we're sending tanks too, reluctantly, right? The people of Germany are not happy about it. And so they're dealing with backlash in Germany. Because why? Because the people of in Germany are recognizing we don't want to get nuked. And you're taking us closer now to a physical. Yeah, all this talk about Ukraine and all of this discussion sounds good. You start sending tanks, we could get dead. And we don't like that idea at all, right? So you're driving the people closer to the reality, to third, category 3, I said, where you're afraid for your own, it's an existential physical threat. And then the U.S. right comes out with this story in the Washington Post that says, yeah, we just did that to give political cover for Olaf Scholz. In other words, Olaf Scholz needed to hoodwink his people and lie to his people. He needed his people didn't want it. So we needed to create an environment where he could double cross his people, where we want this guy to be a double crossing comprador traitor. And we had to create an environment where double crossing compradors, traitors, and quislings can do their work for us. He's a spy. He's a traitor for us. And we look out for our spies and traitors as long as they're doing what we want. So we create, and we're like, come here, traitor, quisling. We need you to do this. And, I can't because my people don't do it. Here's what you do. I think the whole thing was scripted. You just say, Olaf Scholz, say, I won't do it unless you do it. And then we'll shut up for about a week. And then the people in Germany will be like, oh, he stood up for us. Go, Olaf. He finally grew a spine. And then after a week, when that dies off, then we'll say, we're going to send him. And then you can go, oh, darn. They double crossed me. Well, I got to send them because I said that. And now they did that. And there's no way out. Sorry, guys. It was all scripted. And now the U.S. comes back and says, oh, by the way, yeah, we ain't sending no tanks. A year, 2 years, 10 years, whatever. We ain't. The Washington Post said, they could be months, could be years, could be never. Well, I can tell you what it's going to be. Never. And they're like, we created the Washington Post article. We created cover. No, you didn't create cover. You created a script and you gave it to Olaf Scholz and you said, read your words and we'll read ours and shut up and send the damn tanks. And Olaf, as always, did what he was told. And that's the game. That's a win. But meanwhile, people are starting to get hot in Germany. You're creating that environment where people are saying, oh, God, are we going to get nuked? Oh, crap, are we going to be in World War III? We don't want to be in World War III. We don't want to see that big red flag in Berlin anymore. Been down that road. So that's the bottom line. I think that was my point I was getting at. Can there be a peace deal when the 3 dynamics come together for Europe, and Europe is faced to retreat from their dream little world and get down to, we don't want to get nuked and we got to eat, and holy crap, we're just here for US hegemony. We cannot afford that anymore. When they can no longer afford a false reality, that false reality is gone. What do I think of the Iran attacks? That's the neocons. They're fascists. That's what fascists do. Look, what did Germany do in the 40s? Let's attack Poland. Let's attack France. Czechoslovakia. We'll attack them. Hey, but don't forget to bomb the British, Spain. They're passing around. Attack them. Attack them. Everybody gets attacked. That's what fascists do, and that's what they're doing. They're doing what fascists do. They're attacking any and everybody. Now, it's Iran is a threat. In other words, Iran is a growing power. What are we going to do? Well, they won't do what we say. And now Iran's like, we're joining them. We're going to do military. We'll attack Iran. It is an attempt to bait Iran. They're trying to bait countries in. Here's what they want to do. They want to come over and they want to slap you, slap you, slap you. And when you push them away and say, get off me, he attacked me. He's a madman, a violent madman. They want to punch you and kick you. And then when you push them away, oh my God, did you see that violent madman attack me? And then we got the war and we got everything we want. So that's all it is. They're trying to bait Iran. They're trying to bait everybody into attacking them so they can say these people are crazy fascists. That's what the United States, the Fourth Reich has risen. And my office is 6 blocks from the White House. So, I'm looking around. I'm surprised. Before you know it, I'll see a bunch of guys. The Azov battalion will be goose stepping right down 16th Street. Why wouldn't they? All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I do have some things I have to do. Let me look. So why don't I do this? I'm going to see if we got any super chats, and we'll go through them. We'll go through the super chats. Got to go through the super chats. Stand with Ukraine narrative is falling apart fast. Yes, you are right, Rices. I know I bought that word up, that name. It is falling apart. It is crumbling because it's just a narrative. It doesn't exist in the real world. Can we please ask you to answer super chats later? Oh, you mean like do another show? I have to figure out how to do that. Okay, yeah, I'll do that later, but I will try it. Like the Duran does it. If you not have time to, do not only ignore. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, the other day. Oh, my bad, Raphael. Thank you. Oh, I see what you're saying, and that is that sometimes that if like I gotta run, like I had to go to my office or whatever, get to the super chats. That thank you. You know what? Raphael Ligonde is a smart guy. Thanks a lot, man. I will certainly do that. I'm glad you said that. And let me go back over the show that I did the other day and find the super chats. I'll figure out how to do that and I'll answer them. That is a good point. People do super chats and they have a right to hear them answered. 2 of my favorite quotes. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Mike Tyson, and can't we all just get along? Rodney King. Ocock says, thanks for the honest reporting and analysis. Thank you, Ocox. And you are so pleasant person for listening to, says Cast 910. Thank you. SEK. What is that? South Korea? I don't know. Joseph Curry says, does Russia have to take Western Ukraine to keep NATO out? It's possible. I think what Russia's going to do, I really believe this. At some point, I think that what we're looking at is the collapse of political and military collapse of Ukraine. And at that point, there's not really a cohesive military, a cohesive structure to maintain a military. That's what I think. Don't push me, said a certain Pfizer executive. And what was it, Grandmaster Flash? Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. Let's not forget. Oh, Grandmaster Flash. All right. And we got, wow, all of these people on Rockfin. We're going to Rockfin, everybody. Why do I always screw up and do something that causes this thing to like restart? There's some, here we go. All right. Zach Boyle says, morning, Garland. I look forward to your discussions every day. I've got some extra cash to spare today, and I'm grateful for a sensitive voice on the left, slicing through the corporate propaganda with ease. Mainstream advertisements masquerading as news and fact checkers are a severe issue. The left must ask, when has big money, covert, overt, intel, military, farm, and establishment ever shared goals? And we also have to discover of who the hell is the left. I'll make a quick statement on this. Left has, in the US and in Europe, they successfully redefined left. Left was viewing politics through the lens of economic class. That's what's left. That was left. Let me ask you this. Latin America is socialist, socialist, socialist everywhere. Been there, a lot of socialists. They're into socialism. They're mostly Catholic, so most of the countries are like against abortion. The whole kind of LGBTQ2T trans stuff. Again, they're religious and they're conservative and traditional. They ain't big on that. Are they the left? They're socialists. You got to rethink about your definition. What about Africa? Go to Africa. A lot of socialists, a lot of revolutionary movements, right? Very traditionalist. Not much on the LGBTQ2T. I keep always screw that up. LGBTQT issue and the abortion issue, things like that, right? A lot of the traditionalist societies. Hey, how about China, socialist, right? So when you say the LG and what is China doing? Very big on regulation of corporations. Same with South America. So here's my point. How do you define left? So the South Americans are avowed Marxists, Leninists, and socialists, not big on these cultural issues. Are they suddenly not the left? Not big, not pro-corporate, not pro-war. Are they suddenly the left? So my point being this, what the neoliberals in the West, in the U.S. empire, the U.S. and its vassals have redefined as the left is not at all the traditional left. If you want to call that a left, call it a left, but it is not viewing, it does not view, it's not Marxist, it's not Leninist, it's not even close, it's not left, it's not viewing politics in any way through the issue of social class. So when you say big money, Intel, military, pharma, all that stuff, that's not the traditional left. That's not, that is the traditional right. Okay. So we have to figure out what we're talking about when we're talking about the left. Dr. King said, which thick, whatever his name is, offers us a way out of the nightmare. Why is no one asking about truth and reconciliation? What Nat Han was working on most of his life. King nominated him for the Peace Prize. King died for the poor, People's Campaign, as did RFK. No one mentioning solutions. Well, we're fighting liberal. You are correct, sir, and we're fighting neoliberalism as best we can. Bill Wilson, thank you very much. He didn't have anything to say, but he did make a. So, is there anything else? Let me look and make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Lema Lisakova says, "What will the White House do when Russia wins? Nukes? Nah. Keep in mind something. They're trying to maintain power. These powerful people don't want to die. They're doing transhumanism so they can try to put their minds into a computer. They don't want to die. They don't want to die. Russia's going to win. They don't want to die. So I don't see that happening." Raphael again put the lady police in Memphis into context for us, please, as a brother. I don't think that means much. Here's a reality. I view, here's what I'll say about that, the Memphis police thing. The difference between foreign policy in the U.S. empire and domestic policy is grammatical only. If you look at what the U.S. does to poorer countries around the world, to countries that it's able to physically dominate, it beats the hell out of them, it bombs them, it takes their stuff, it treats them like hell. It physically abuses and brutalizes it. Look at the Middle East. Look at Africa. Look at South America, right? Just with wanton disregard and reckless disregard for human life. That is the history of the United States. And I mean, dare I need to go to Syria and Libya and in Iraq and on and on and on. So That's just what's going on here, the same exact thing. Whereas in Afghanistan, you had, the 101st Airborne bashing down the door of some Muslim family, coming in, throwing grenades, machine gunning everybody, and then waiting to see who was alive left over. Oh, what do you know? It was only a family of 12. Oh, well, no Taliban here. On to the next house and kill everybody there too, right? That's the way it was. That's what I see the same here. They're like, okay, we got some people here. Their lives mean nothing to them, and if they aggravate us in the slightest bit, we'll treat them the same way. And as far as the black misleadership class, well, look at the Congressional Black Caucus. What are they doing? Look at Hakeem Jeffries. What are they doing? They're doing the same thing that the Congressional White Caucus is doing. They're filling their stinking pockets. They're making themselves rich. They're hungry for power. Think about this. Make a point. People, there's tent cities, there's homeless people, there's struggling, there's increase of crime, there's all of these problems, right? And what are the Democrats upset about right now? What are they whining about on Twitter? Because they're losing their seats on congressional committees. Hey, man, things are really bad here in America. And people are like, whoa, my God, you finally figured that out. Things are really bad. What are you going to do now? Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? Oh, my God, it's horrible. What are you going to do? Well, we don't know, because it's really rough that we've lost our seats on these cushy congressional committees. We've got to fight back against the Republicans because they're taking our seats on these congressional committees. That's their concern. That's the ruling elite. People here are like, we can't afford eggs. We can't afford to pay energy. We can't afford to buy a house. And they're like, that's not important now. We're losing our seats on the congressional committees. So the lady police chief, well, I'll put it like this. It's like Hollywood. You know what I mean? Hey, let's make a movie. And in this movie, the person's going to be the lead, the superhero is going to be black. They're going to be trans. They're going to be gay. They're going to be whatever, right? Does that make it a better movie or a worse movie? Does that make it anything? It's still a movie. It's still a superhero movie where the superhero does this or that and that it goes down. It's a movie. Well, you know what? Same thing. A female police officer, a black police officer, a blue, an alien, a three-headed police officer. The cops are on the street, and some poor bastard is in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they pull him over. They will beat him to death with wanton disregard for human life in exactly the same way that those troops will bash down the door of this poor Muslim family in Kabul and machine gun every damn body in the house and go on about their business. Same thing. That's the way I see it. Looking forward to Moats USA, a clear alternative to MSN propaganda, solidarity with working for the people. Yeah, Moats is great, isn't it? I love they're really, really funny. Could a brother be Sheriff Bull O'Connor, sir? Yeah, of course. Certainly. As I said, look at Hakeem Jeffries right now. Look at this guy. He's simply, look, all we create is the same thing over and over, right? So he is the latest iteration. The machine wants a person who will be Nancy Pelosi. She's gone. They got a black iteration of Nancy Pelosi, a black male. If they could find a gay or a trans, or if they got Buttigieg is now a gay iteration of Nancy Pelosi. They're all the same thing. John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Nancy Pelosi, they're all the same person. So the idea that we look at it and say, oh, they've got a black person in there now doing neoliberal imperialism and warmongering around the world. Oh no, great, we're good shape now. We've got a gay person doing it. We got a trans person doing it. We got a short person doing it. The issue is not who's doing the deed. If you're getting robbed, what do you care about the gender or height or weight or race of the person sticking a gun in your face? You're getting robbed. The world's getting robbed. And the machine now is playing a game to find different colors and sizes and genders of people to rob the world, but they're still robbing it. That's my thoughts on that. So I'm not as overly focused on the gender, whatever, of the person who's doing the act. I look at the act. The act is consistent. Whoever's there. Bunch of white cops pull a black dude over, beat the hell out of him. Bunch of white guys, bunch of whatever, Latino cops, whoever, doesn't matter. They pull some guy over. If they're in the mood to beat him to death, they're going to do it. Last time it was a white guy with George Floyd. This time it's 5 black guys. People in America will utilize the color of the cops to say, see, that proves it's racism, it's all white cops. That proves it's not racism, it's all black cops. But there's still a guy getting the crap beat out of him, or a homeless person. Don't get me wrong. Don't be a poor little old homeless person or a mentally ill person. You're getting it too. The cops come on, you might get shot, beaten, dog sicked on you. I remember we had these officers. There were 3 officers, and one of them was a female officer. And in PG County, because I was a cop in PG County some years ago, and they were checking a building. They got an alarm in the building, and they got there and they used the dogs to check the building, right? No, nobody in there. They come out, there's like a couple of homeless guys, Latino homeless guys, they're sleeping. They sick their dogs on them, and like the dog bit one of the guys all up, and he went to the hospital just to do it. Just because they had dogs and those guys were there. It's like, hey, we got dogs. What do you got? People. Hey, dogs, people. Have them bite the people. And they bit the people. They were dogs. Doesn't matter if they were what the gender or race or anything of the people was. When you understand that that's America, that's how America sees, they were poor Latino guys. They could have been white guys. They could have been black guys. In that context, they were poor. Again, now I'm evaluating that through the context of economic class. They were nobodies is what they were to the system. They were homeless people. They could have been any color. They were poor people through the lens of economic class. They were expendable. They were dispensable. Put the dogs on them and have the dogs bite them. That's not to belittle the issue of there are issues of race and class, and all of these things need to be taken into context. But I'm just saying, I'm making that point about that. Well, guys and girls and everyone, I think, let's see. Garland, you're brilliant and courageous. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Looking forward to modes. I think that's it. Let me see. Did I miss anything else? I think I just don't have enough sense to not say what I'm thinking. Modern police in the U.S. see the public at large as enemy combatants instead of fellow citizens. That's a fact. Yeah, that's a good point. And so, like I said, I'm not brilliant, gracious. I just don't have any better sense than to know. You know what? I think it's the Zen thing, because I'm like this. How much time do we have in the context of history? 100 years from now, just think about this. At some point, you and everybody listening will have been dead for 1,000 years. We'll have been dead for 100,000 years. We'll be dead. We'll have been dead for 100 million years. 100 million years from now, we've all been dead for 100 million years. Technically, you could argue that we never even existed. If you've been dead for 100 million years in the context of history, you were nothing but the transformation of energy. At some point, energy transformed into one thing. At some point, it transformed into you. At some point, it transformed into everything. So that being said, what difference does it make? Say what you're thinking. Do what you want to do. Live the way you want to live. Respect other people. But when it comes to this kind of stuff, if you believe it, say it. You got nothing here to live. 100 billion years from now, at least somebody said it, what they were thinking. I could be wrong about everything, but at least I said what the hell I was thinking. So, am I missing anybody? Bill Wilson, I think. Thanks a lot, Bill. Yeah, I don't want to miss anybody over here on Rockfin. I think that's it. Let me check again. I might have missed some people on Rockfin. Oh, okay. John T says, I enjoy your work, Garland, but rarely find you live. Yeah, live Sunday morning. Thank you. Easy like Sunday morning. Brandon Burke says, Mr. Nixon, did you spend a big part of your childhood in Georgia? Nope, in Maryland. I'm not trying to be insulting at all, so I hope you don't take it that way. But a lot of the time, to me, you speak with the same cadence as Ray Charles, the show enough right reverend. Nope, grew up in Maryland, believe it or not, just outside of Baltimore, in the suburbs. Thanks for helping maintain my sanity, and that's not an easy task. Well, maybe it's not I'm maintaining your sanity. Maybe I'm just as crazy as you are. And you know what? Maybe being crazy ain't all that bad. Remember, there was an old song, Ain't It Great to Be Crazy? Postscript, you might consider the baller move of pronouncing President Xi correctly as she. Oh, there you go. I don't know. I screw up. I can barely say LGBTQ half the time. Etc. is like the Europeans deciding Peking was a better name than Beijing, or Nanking was easier than Nanjing, or Bombay, Burma, Rhodesia, etc. People are naturally uncomfortable saying his name because he's a man. You start dropping his she and you'll exude even more confidence than usual. Thanks a lot. I'm glad you told me that. So it's pronounced she. I didn't know. Barely pronounced Garland half of the time, but I'm doing the best I can, We used to have there used to be a cigarette advertisement many, many years ago. And they said at the end of it, they said, what do you want? Good grammar or good taste? So that's what I'm doing, guys. I'm doing the best I can. Anything else? Why Dr. West did not give a speech? I don't know, tell you the truth. I'm not familiar with anything going on with Dr. West lately, but thank you very much, Raphael. I don't know. Ed? Okay, that's it, everybody. Thanks a lot. I think I've hit everything I could. As I always say, I'll give you the last 30-second spiel. Rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. So when and if, let's hope they don't, but if they throw me off of Facebook, you can go to Rockfin and you can be a member of the Rockfin family. How's that? And you see everything going by. Buymeacoffee.com/Garland NH, Cash App, Patreon. If you can do $1, $3, or $1 million a month, whatever you can do is great. Certainly appreciate it. And Rockfin, free to join. One last thing about Rockfin, and that is Rockfin is great because there's no advertisements. They do have a subscriber option, which is $14.99 a month. But if you sign up for a year, it's only $9.99 a month because they take a couple of months off free. So if you can do that, and the reason that they do the subscriber is because that's the only way they can stay on. They can, create. Rockfin doesn't do advertisements. It's got to do something. And the way that works is that each creator on Rockfin does one subscriber only show per week, and the people who are subscribers get that one. And I do one per week. Everything else, all of my other stuff is here Wednesday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. I do Scott Ritter, and we do our subscriber only, and it's really worth it. So thanks a lot, everybody. Peace. I'm out.